I look back on a lot of things and a lot of choices that I had made throughout the years, and I'm like, yo, man, like there definitely was like a lot of things that I compromised on who I was as a person, who I was as like myself, just to feel like I was fitting into the community.
You push boundaries and you go to places, even in the type of music that you create, that not most people explore. You talked about how music was something that kept you grounded in those early years.
I just had confidence. I just had like this inner belief in myself that like, yo, I can make a career out of this, right? Especially when you're younger, you're like, yo, man, like all it takes is just me like release some songs and like one song, and then I'm gonna be as big as Drake. I'm determined and I'm motivated, but I'm also stubborn. I do think there's a lot of value in changing your social circles. Like if you want to be a winner, like surrounding yourself with winners is a good idea. Especially if you have a good relationship with your family, keep your family close. Like that's the one thing I can just say to anyone is like if you have a good relationship with your family, like you're not like at odds with your parents, keep them close.
Teon, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.
To start us off, one thing I really loved about your story is you're obviously born in Botswana. And I think you lived in South Africa for a bit.
Yeah.
Angola, if I'm not mistaken. I'm actually from Tanzania.
Oh, cool.
And I was born and raised there, lived there pretty much all my life, and then I moved to Kenya for boarding school, and now I'm here. So it was nice to see some representation there.
Yeah. Did you do IB?
Yeah, I did IB as well, and I saw that as well. So yeah, talk to me about growing up. What was your life like living in all these countries? Tell me more about your background and growing up in like Africa in general.
Growing up, it was tough. I think just moving around so much, like every 3 or 4 years, whether it was Botswana, Angola, South Africa, England, or Canada, like wherever we were moving to, it was difficult because there's so much change.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to my like development, right? So I've seen like different parts of the world.
Yeah.
I understand different cultures, different people.
Yeah.
And I'm able to not like I'm able to deal with change a lot easier now as an adult. Where I see some of my peers and my friends, they really struggle with that.
Yeah.
But like Botswana, South Africa, it's a vibe, man.
Yeah.
It's just a different vibe.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I completely agree. I definitely miss home a lot in that sense. I want to dive deeper into that, right? Like, obviously you mentioned that moving around definitely helped with like dealing with like change and being in different situations. What were you like in school? I know you said you did the IB.
Yeah.
What were you like in terms of like, and also like in terms of the changes? Why was it that you had to like move to all the different places?
So my pops, his job, he worked with a lot of like NGOs and like SADC and the UN. He worked with helping developing countries just be better prepared for like natural disasters and be able to grow crops through those natural disasters.
Nice.
So with that job, he kind of had to be close to his region that he was like appointed to work in. So that's why we had to move so many times. But yeah, mainly it was like Southern Africa. That's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
And what was the other question?
I was just like what were you like in school? Like,
man, yeah, I don't know.
Did you like school? Like, was it like?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I did like well in school. I was like, I think for the most part, except for maybe my last couple of years, I was pretty well liked in school.
Yeah.
Played a lot of sports. Yeah, I don't know. I was just like a bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, fair.
Yeah.
I did read in one of like the interviews that you did that you talked about how music was something that kept you grounded in those early years. So you would write poems, you write lyrics in high school. And you also mentioned like music being like an international language, which I thought was different. Like I hadn't heard that before. Talk to me more about that and how you were introduced to music in your very like early years.
So my brother had a bunch of CDs that he just had in like a CD binder.
Yeah.
And like when he would go out to like play sports with his friends or whatever, I'd just be at home and I'd go through his CD binder.
Yeah.
And I'd just start playing a bunch of his CDs. And I remember I just kind of like, there was one or two that I really liked, so I just kind of kept them for myself.
Yeah.
And like he was like, "Yo, you see my CDs?" I was like, "Nah, bro, I have no idea where I
Yeah.
don't see those." Obviously, like I had them and he knew, but
Yeah.
that's kind of how I kind of got introduced. So it was pretty much everything he was listening to. So at the time it was like Fugees and like a lot of like Snoop Dogg, Dr.
Yeah.
Dre, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really what like got me into like because my family been playing like Bob Marley in the house and all
Yeah.
that all
Yeah.
the time, but like hip hop, that was like my first real introduction to it, and I was just like, yo, this is crazy. Like
Yeah.
everyone looks so cool, they sound so cool, and I just kind of like fell in love with it. Um, and then yeah, like I kind of look at like music as like an international language because with moving so much, like that was like the one thing that I found like was consistent. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
like like everyone listens to Drake, everyone listens to
Exactly.
50 Cent, everyone
Yeah.
so it's just like as we're progressing throughout my life, I was like, damn, yo, like this is kind of my way of connecting with people, is like, yo, like sharing playlists and like just putting people on to like the different artists,
Yeah.
and like kind of being like the hype beast of music was like my
Yeah.
way of connecting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nah, it makes sense. Um, I did read somewhere that in some of your early years you also played at your church,
Mm.
which I thought was really interesting. Talk to me about that. I think you played the guitar, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk to me about that. Like, yeah, what would you say that was like a huge part of you at the time?
Yeah, it was a really large part of like my life at the time. Also, most of my high school years, I was like pretty popular, and then, I started getting more involved in like my local church,
Yeah.
and things changed a lot in my social circles.
Yeah.
And I was making choices that I thought were, to benefit me as a person in my
Yeah.
in the long
Yeah.
run of my life. Um, looking back, that was just like me being young and a bit naive.
Mm.
But yeah, like church became a big part of my life, and like I was obviously writing lyrics and stuff throughout school, but I started like leaning more towards like playing actual instruments, so a lot of bass and a lot of like guitar.
Mm.
Yeah, I got like really active with it. I was playing a lot of worship bands, and it's interesting because it's obviously definitely not what I do now.
Yeah.
It's definitely not like a lifestyle I promote now.
Yeah.
But there's like some invaluable lessons that I learned from that. Like just the idea that like you can go into a room, no one really knows who you are, and you can have a commanding presence, and like people in church would say like authority or something like that. Like I learned that from that community, and like public speaking, I'm not worried about that. Like
Yeah.
it's just from years of just like making announcements or going up on stage and
Yeah.
doing something in front of hundreds of people, and
Yeah.
like, you just get used to it.
Yeah.
So there's certain life skills that are like I would not have learned anywhere else.
Mm.
No matter what my relationship is with like church or God or
Yeah.
religion now.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned that there was, I guess, a point where you, I guess, intentionally change your like social circles, and things of that sort. I mean, I went through like a similar experience where, when I was in, I think, like grade 9 or something, I also like, because I was moving a lot. Like I moved to a new, like I was going to boarding school in Kenya and had a different context. Like I started realizing like, oh, like maybe the circles I'm part of right now aren't like the best for me, and there's something else I want to work towards. And I had to make that intentional decision. What is it that like I guess sparked you to change those social circles, or change?
And I was honestly just on some bullshit, dog. I was just trying to live a holy life, bro.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to be around like people who were holy, and I felt like it was almost like I was very self-righteous looking back on it, and like just like I said, young and naive. I do think there's a lot of value in changing your social circles. Like if you want to be a winner, like surrounding yourself with winners is a good idea.
Exactly.
Like you'll never go wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
But at the time when I was younger, I was like just on like some judgmental. I'm better than you kind of shit. It's not like anything
Fair.
deeper than that. Yeah.
Nah, fair. Nah, fair. I guess moving a bit forward with your journey, you obviously moved to Canada. I think you're in Kelowna, right?
Yeah, that's where I moved. Yeah.
And what was that transition like? Growing up in Kelowna, and especially with like music. I know you used to like playing a lot of bands as well. what was that transition like? And in terms of like music, what was your journey?
You know, it's really interesting, right? Because I always used to get asked this question. I used to be like, "Oh no, man! Like culture shock was all good, man.
Yeah,
Like it wasn't a problem,
yeah,
like because I visited Canada so many times,
exactly.
but I look back on a lot of things and a lot of choices that I had made throughout the years, and I'm like, yo, man, like there definitely was like a lot of things that I compromised on who I was as a person, who I was as like myself, just
Yeah.
to feel like I was fitting into the community.
Yeah.
And I look back on that and I'm like, oh, that's crazy, you know. And I think I'm a pretty easygoing person.
Yeah.
So at the time while it was happening, I wasn't like really like being cognizant that it was actually happening. But yeah, man, like people started calling me like Teon's my stage name. I have like a government name, which is like an African name. It
Yeah.
starts with the letter T, but it was like people really struggle to pronounce it. And like one of the things was like I just accepted, yo, just call me T. Just call me T. And I probably was known in the city of Kelowna, but it's just T.
T.
As like I literally I was working jobs. I was working for like Shaw Cable.
Yeah.
And like my job, like people would call me, hey, it's T from
T.
Shaw. Like
Yeah.
like it wasn't even like my full name ever.
Yeah.
And I look back on that and I was like, yeah, I did that to make things easier for myself, but it was also to accommodate other people. And I found myself doing that a lot. Like I started making hip hop music when I came to Canada. Like I was making it, but I wasn't releasing it.
I see.
Because I was like, oh man, there's no way that in a city like Kelowna, I can find a way to like make a career out of this. So I was playing like indie alternative bands.
Yeah.
And that's also like a compromise that I made to accommodate other people in the city that I was in, as opposed to just kind of staying true to like who I was as a person. So I look back and there's a lot of self-discovery that kind of happened in Kelowna. And especially leaving it, I realized that I was like, you know, these are all just like little small changes that I was making that, you know, like aren't really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But when you make enough of those small changes, it kind of changes who you are.
Exactly.
So like I look back on that and I'm like, wow, that was actually a really challenging time for me. And like my journey of self-discovery. And a lot of it is like, especially when you're like, you know, in your early 20s and shit, man, like you're already trying to figure out who you are anyway.
Exactly.
So doing all that, as well as like being in a completely different place with no representation, and I didn't realize how important that was to me because it had just always been around me.
Yeah.
That kind of tripped me out a bit.
I feel like that I'm so glad you shared that, right? Because one, a lot of people don't talk about that, and it's like people don't go there. And two, like in my own experience, I moved to Canada last year, and when I was at home, like I fully knew myself. Like I knew what I wanted to do in life. Like I knew, although I was still young, like I had like dreams. I knew my identity. I knew what I like, what I don't like. And then I moved here, and I'm like, who the fuck am I? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I felt so lost in that sense.
Yeah.
And I was running away from my identity as like an African or someone that's of like Indian descent. Like I don't know. I would kind of run away from that just to like fit in, as you said. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think anyone, you know, I think everyone goes through that. It's just a little bit more like, there's a bit more of a microscope on it when you're like, oh man, there's like, I have no security here.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's a little bit like more extreme, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And for someone that's like watching and kind of going through this same phase that they are in right now, what would you, I guess, like change about that time, or I guess looking back, like what advice would you probably give someone that's going through that transition right now?
I think just like just learning, you know, just being open-minded is really important. But also being grounded is also important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not, I think everyone should go through something like that. You should go through something like that because you can't be the same person you were when you were 15 or when you're 21 or, you know, like when I'm 40, I expect to be a different person than who I was when I was 20, right?
Exactly.
Like you're supposed to grow and change.
Exactly.
But you know, like there's certain core values and certain things that like, especially if you have a good relationship with your family, keep your family close. Like that's the one thing I can just say to anyone is like, if you have a good relationship with your family, like you're not like at odds with your parents.
Yeah.
Keep them close, yo. Keep your brother and sister close because like the older I get, the more I realize like family really is forever. Like I've had like shorties that I was like obsessed with, like this is my girl, like oh my god, we're gonna get married or whatever, and then like and we don't even talk, you know. But no matter what happened, family and my roots has always been a real big priority with me. So even those like old traditions that like, you know, I used to hate growing up. I look back on those and I'm like, yo, man, that's really a part of who I am. That's my culture.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of those things. So I try to put those things into practice, you know. And I really admire. Like I have a lot of Mexican friends, and I really admire like how true that their family is to like their heritage. Like,
Yeah.
everyone's like, oh no, I can't see you this day. Why not? Oh, it's Day of the Dead. It's like, oh, that's crazy. Like, it's
Yeah.
really that important to you,
Yeah.
and that's cool. I think that's really dope.
No, I love that. I love that so much. And yeah, I think that's something that, like, as you're talking, I'm also thinking about is like those cultures and those traditions that like you have at home with your family. Like sometimes I'm like, "Ugh, I don't want to do this," or
Yeah.
like that's annoying. Like I'm not trying to, or I don't even talk to it. Like I don't share it with my friends and stuff. It's something like I try to run away from. But no, that's so powerful, and it does like contribute to your identity for sure. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying that bit of the podcast. I was hoping if you can potentially leave a review or subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening on YouTube. It would honestly mean the world, and this will help us to reach to more people and have that impact that we want to have. Thank you. Um, Going back to your journey in Kelowna, I know you obviously got like a diploma for audio engineering. And then after that, I know you worked a couple jobs as well. You said you worked at Shaw. I think you worked at like Shopify as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Were you doing music on the side? And talk to me about that phase of your life. Like, where were you at? And yeah, like talk to me more about that phase.
I call that chapter in my life, bruh,
Yeah.
because it was just bruh. Like, I couldn't get ahead, man. You know, I was working, whether it was like full time at Shaw or full time at Shopify. You know, finishing up my days at like 6 p.m. or whatever, and then get home, you know, have some food, maybe chill out a little bit,
Yeah.
and then start working on music. And I would be working on music until like 2 or 3 a.m. You know, that was kind of like, though it's like I don't want to put more hours into a job that I don't really see a future in,
Yeah.
than a career that I'm really invested in.
Yeah.
So I was making that sacrifice, and I call it bruh because it sounds cool when you talk about it. You know, it
Yeah.
sounds like, oh, the grind nonstop, but like when you're actually doing it and you're sleeping 3-4 hours a night, it's not healthy, bro.
Yeah.
And you're also just in a really negative headspace because you just don't like the work you do.
Exactly.
And you really have to find a lot of like motivation.
Yeah.
And you got to find a lot of like, you have to be so determined to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, that was hard for me. That was really, really hard
Yeah.
for me, especially near the end before I ended up leaving Shopify, because I was like, yo, I think I can make this music thing like work full time. Like, I think I can do it.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was like very disengaged with
Yeah.
my work. Like I didn't want to do it. I didn't care.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I called that time period bruh because it just wasn't it.
Yeah. I feel like going back to that period, I feel like most people, a lot of people are in that situation right now, right? Like a lot of people are doing jobs that they don't necessarily want to do. And when you're in that mindset for like long enough time, it's either there's like this tipping point where you're like, you know what, like I guess you just accept the reality of things and you're like, this is what I'm gonna do forever. Other people do have ideas or things that they're passionate about. And wouldn't even, like you said, you come back home at 6 p.m. and you'd like eat, like chill out a bit and then work on music until like past midnight.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't even do that,
Yeah.
Why was it, I guess at that time, what was your headspace like in terms of, like music is my thing and I want to like really kind of grind it out or whatever. And you can see that you're passionate about it and you knew you could kind of do it full time eventually. So what was going through your head at that time? I know you said it was tough, it was difficult, but yeah, curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, a lot of it was just, I just felt like, and I don't know, like so I just had confidence. I just had like this inner belief in myself that like, yo, I can make a career out of this, right? And especially especially when you're younger, you're like, yo, man, like all it takes is just me like release some songs and like one song, and then I'm gonna be as big as Drake. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thoughts that I would have.
Yeah.
So I was like, eventually, if I just keep working like this, it'll happen. And so yeah, that's really just like I just wanted more from my life because, you know, I also think I'd seen my parents grind. You know, like when I was really young, we had like literally nothing, bro. Like, you know, like I was seeing my parents working 2-3 jobs just to keep the lights on, and then eventually seeing them progress to where my dad was, you know, working with NGOs and like with the UN as like a consultant. And it's like, wow, yo, like I really saw like him come up.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, I guess without me realizing, it's like instilled a lot of like inspiration into me of like, okay, dog, like you can do it if you just put the work in.
Yeah.
But you know, it's also like it comes with like really bad habits too.
Yeah.
You know, like because like I'm determined and I'm motivated, but I'm also stubborn. You know, and it's yeah, it can be very difficult to even balance like a social life now when like that's my priority, and I prioritize that so much. And even getting out of the headspace of my day job just to get into the creative space of like art and music. You know, like I was drinking just to be able to like loosen up.
Yeah.
But then if you're doing that 6-7 days a week, it's like, bro,
Yeah.
like that's actually pretty unhealthy. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
Not getting
So,
enough sleep as well.
yeah,
Like working during the day. Yeah.
it's just not really sustainable.
Yeah. I'm curious to learn more about like the people that were around you at that point in your life. Because something that I've seen is that really matters, you know. What are these people around you saying? What is this conversation that you're having? What support you have maybe from your family or whatever?
Yeah.
What was that like?
The two closest people into my day-to-day life at the time was the girl that I was seeing. Yeah, she did a lot for me. She really like supported me. She really held me down. Bruh, like I just remember like where there are times, man, because it's like with music, people don't understand. It's not, okay, I shouldn't say people don't understand. Like anything entrepreneurial, there's a lot of investment into it.
Yeah.
Whether it's time, but also like financially, you're investing a lot
Exactly.
of time into it. The thing with music though is that it is it does depend. The success of it does depend on people just receiving it well. Right. So even if you invest a ton of money into ads or whatever, if they just don't like the song, they just don't like the
They
song.
don't like the song. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or they don't like the music video. They don't like the music video. And
Yeah.
like, you know, things would happen where it's like, okay, like I made this song, I'm gonna shoot a music video. I'm gonna put $1,500 into shooting this music video, which is an extremely cheap music video. Like music videos cost a lot of money.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you gotta market that music video. So you made a song and then you made a music video and then you gotta market it. So you're talking like $2,000-$3,000 just for that one song. And that's like a tiny budget, like a really, really small budget.
Yeah.
So you put all that money you invested in, you work your day job, you invested in, and then it's like, dog, like it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking, but it's also, you're like, shit, man, did I just waste all this money on this? So there were times like, yo, where we were so broke and like, yo, she held me down, man. Like she never questioned like, you know, my intentions. She knew that I was working hard and like she always supported me. Like, man, like we could make $60 last 2 weeks if we needed to, just like for as far as food and that kind of stuff. So and she's doing really well for herself now. Like she's moved on and she's taken over like the recruiting world. She works for a large company.
Yeah.
She's doing really great. And the other person who was very close to me was my boy KB. And we were just kind of in like a similar place. He used to play professional ball in Canada, and he stopped playing that. And he eventually picked up a camera. He was shooting a lot of my visuals. And now he has a company called Joybox, which has like gone on to do amazing things, right? So everyone in that house at that time, like we had just like the same mentality of like, let's just work, let's just grind, let's support each other. And yeah, it was a hard time, but I look back on it and I'm like, dog, that was like a beautiful time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Having people like that around you is like really important.
That's so powerful. Thanks for sharing. KB was actually on the show.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, and he did mention you as well.
Oh, that's my guy, yo.
Yeah, so it's nice to hear that, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
it's nice to see that you
That's
had.
that's actually like my brother, bro.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
like
and it's nice to see that, you know, you had like, I feel like it's so important, especially when, you know, you're like down in the ranches, like you're really like hustling out, like trying to figure out like that next paycheck or that next, you know, that next song or whatever it is, right, at that point. And the people that are around you at that time, I feel like it's so important to have that support, because for a lot of people, like they don't have that, and they can go down like a very bad rabbit hole. So
yeah. I did a conference this year. I threw a conference, a 4-day music conference.
yeah,
And I ran the idea by a couple people.
yeah,
And some of these people are a little bit newer in my circle.
yeah,
And yeah, like a lot of it was like I was getting a lot of like, oh, maybe just do like, you know, one night, just try something smaller.
Yeah.
And I was just like, nah, man, like I'm ambitious. And it just really reminded me of like, nah, like it's so important to make sure you have people that are like, how do you make it work, as opposed to just like shooting you down.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's so true, man. It's like the people you surround yourself with is very, very, very important.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, now you've quit your job like full time from like Shopify, you said, and you're like, I'm gonna go full time as an artist. What was what sort of sparked that decision? I know you said obviously like it, like strategically it made sense, but also um like you weren't happy at your job, like,
Yeah.
and you knew you wanted to do this. So what was how tough was that decision? Because a lot of people are probably there as well, and
Yeah.
and taking that leap of faith is sometimes really hard, right? And so talk to me about that, and also post that, to what did life look like?
So I had been planning for like 6 months to leave my job.
Mm.
And I was working towards like building a tour, filling out my summer just with like, so I knew I had income coming in.
Mm.
And, you know, I had figured it out to where I was like, I don't need to spend that much money to like, you know, like my budget was pretty small. Like I figured out a way to be like, okay, I can live off of $1,600 a month.
Nice.
Right. Which is in Vancouver is crazy,
It's-
but
yeah.
it's so cheap. Right. But I just figured out, I was like, if I can just get to that number every month, like I'm paying all my bills and I'm able to feed myself
Yeah.
and keep my head above water. So, yeah, I was just like working towards that goal. Cause honestly, man, like Shopify wasn't paying me that much.
Yeah.
Like I think every paycheck every 2 weeks was like $1,200, man. Like what the average Canadian makes, right?
Yeah.
It was like $1,200 every 2 weeks. So I'm like, okay, well, like, yeah, it's a bit of a pay cut, but I actually do something that I'm like actually love
Yeah.
and care about.
Yeah.
And then I went for it, and then the pandemic hit, and then all my plans changed, and then I was just like, damn. But I mean, like, we figured it out. Like we just grinded through the last 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
And then this year is like the first year coming out of it where I'm actually like seeing proof of concept.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's obviously a lot of building that I've done in the interim to like make this year a lot more successful than your first year out of a job.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I don't know. I just think like there's a whole lot of things. Like even looking at school, like it's like you can get a degree and it's helpful for you to some degree, but like the school environment is like, it's unhealthy, bro.
It is. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like, I have midterms, exams, essays, papers. Like, for me to meet a student who's sleeping 8 hours a night, it's like, dog, that never happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, it's so tough on your mental health.
Yeah.
So it's like, I was just like, man, if I was gonna go to school and get a degree, because I thought about going back to school and like get a degree 4 or 5 years. It's like, bro, like why don't I just work towards what I'm trying to do now for 4 or 5 years and I get to where I want to be.
Yeah.
So.
Nah, I think you couldn't have said it better. I mean, yeah, I feel like with school, I completely relate to that, and I have those thoughts all the time, and yeah, it is a very unhealthy environment for sure.
100%, man.
Like it's rare to meet people that get 8 hours for sure.
Yeah.
I know your move from Kelowna to Vancouver was also sort of like a big like point, where you sort of also made that decision intentionally, right? You sort of saw the music scene, you saw how things would be different in Vancouver. Talk to me about that transition and what that was like.
I think so. So when I moved to Vancouver, I still had a full-time job. So I was here for a couple of years, and then I quit my job.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it was just like I was tired of playing in bands and being the hardest working person in that band. And I knew that like I just had the self awareness to know like, yo, I'm not good enough to be like, and I don't really love it enough also to be, an indie alternative like musician and singers. Like
Yeah.
I'm a good in a band because I'm
Yeah.
just playing a role.
Yeah.
But to do the whole thing myself was like, I'm not like, that's not really me.
Yeah.
But what I'm like, I felt like I was really good at songwriting and like making like hip hop and R&B music. So I was like, yo, let me just do that. And I knew I couldn't do that in Kelowna, so I left.
Yeah.
And I just came here. I was like, all right, I either do the crazy thing, I go all the way to Toronto, or I go to Vancouver where I know a few people.
Yeah.
And then I came here and started from scratch.
That's and it's tough. Like I feel like people don't give enough credit to people that do make those moves. Like it's like moving to a new place again. It's like a big thing as well. And I'm glad you. I think one thing I can say from your journey is you're definitely very like you had a good self awareness and you would keep reflecting on every move that you made. Right, like
Yeah.
everything was super intentional. At every point in your life.
Yeah.
You did talk about you know obviously quitting your full-time job and then kind of grinding it out, but COVID hit. Talk to me more about that. Like I want to learn more about during COVID, how are you running yourself like financially? I know you had a tour plan, but obviously things didn't work out. What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first year of COVID, like I took advantage of like CERB and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like everyone else did.
Yeah.
And the second year, I didn't take any kind of support from anyone, which was really tough because I didn't really make all that much money, right?
Yeah.
But it's just like I was just doing anything I could to make money, bro. Like if I had to, buy some shoes and flip the shoes, I'd do that. If I was
Nice.
like, I had to like refurbish furniture, I would do it. Like anything that I knew that I could do, and I could just sell on Marketplace, I was doing. Or if I ever saw like an odd job pop up, like yeah, it wasn't the career path I wanted to do, but I was like, yeah, I'll just grind it out. And then I knew summertime, like when things opened up, I was
Yeah.
like, okay, we're good for summer. Like
Yeah.
I'll be able to like actually just do what I
Book
want to
show.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just the 6 months, the other 6 months of the year that I had to figure it out. So yeah, that was very challenging.
Nah, I'm glad you shared that because most people don't see that part, right? Like all they see is like whatever's out there.
Yeah.
They never fully see like that hustle and the things that you had to do to I guess manage yourself during those times. So thanks for sharing. Just a quick one. If you see value in this conversation, I want to take this further and introduce you our weekly newsletter. The goal of the newsletter is to provide resources, opportunities, and show you guys some of the behind the scenes stuff that we have. So if this is of your interest and you want to gain more value from the podcast, I recommend using the link in the description to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you. Something that I was really inspired by in some of the work that you've done is obviously your work with the 100 Collective. I think I'm not sure if it's because of your like background growing up in all the different places and you saw um like the different I guess how life is like in different places around the world, or if you saw like the music industry on its own, and the scene and helping other people. But talk to me about the 100 Collective. How did the idea come about? And I know you guys did the culture conference that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100 Collective, we started it because um, I was looking at my own career as an artist.
Yeah.
I was sitting with KB and we were watching a bunch of like YouTube videos of artists just coming on and performing, and we're just like, yo, we just started talking, and I was explaining like, yo, it's just like it shouldn't be this hard for artists to be able to get ahead in a city like Vancouver. And we were just there like, yo, we can make this content. Like, we both can do it, and we can like I can bring in the artist, you can film it and edit it, and that's where the whole thing like was kind of birthed from, was that idea. And just looking around, it's like there's not a lot of infrastructure here. There's no like label presence in Vancouver. There's, especially if you make hip hop and R&B, there's not a ton of management. So it's like, yeah, you might make a song, you put it out through DistroKid, and for people like watching, DistroKid is like a service that you use to take your music and get it onto like Spotify and Apple. So yeah, you can do that, but then after that, like what happens? You know, like there's no next step.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, I'm just gonna keep making songs, and hopefully one of them goes viral. It's kind of like most people's plan.
Yeah.
So we're just like, yo, like how do we add infrastructure? And that's where 100 Collective was birthed.
Nice. And what were some of, like, talk to me more about the cultural conference that you guys did, or some of the other projects.
Yeah, so I mean, it started out of us just doing like small artist showcases
Yeah.
digitally, and then throughout COVID, we did a couple like virtual like festivals.
Yeah.
So we were like, all right, okay, well, let's just keep that running. Like we built a little bit of a brand. So
Yeah.
we have like the boutique festival, which is called 100 Fest,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be an annual festival in Vancouver where
Nice.
we just choose like some of the coolest like hip hop and R&B artists in the city,
Yeah.
put them on stage, promote them.
Yeah.
And then I did something called Culture Con, which is a 4-day conference. You have like delegates and like panelists that talk during the day. And then in the evening, there's like showcases from different artists. We chose to do that in Kelowna because one, Vancouver is like crazy saturated.
Yeah.
Two, just with like my background and like KB's background in Vancouver, it's a lot easier for us to just like based off of relationships, like just get things to happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like we have like a network of people who are like, oh my God, yeah, I would love to help you guys. Like, no problem.
Yeah.
And then it's like, they don't even care about the money part of
Yeah.
it, bro. Like, venues are just like, yo, you can use our venue. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Like, just, make sure that we sell at the bar.
Yeah.
So that was like a choice. And then also, like, if you think about like Coachella, they don't do it in LA. They do it like an hour outside of LA,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
like, that's just kind of like the goal is to grow that. And now we have our own distribution like record label that
Nice.
we can sign artists and
Yeah.
get their music onto those platforms.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do everything local.
Nice.
Yeah.
And why is that important? Like, doing everything local. I know in a lot of the interviews that you've done, I've seen that idea of promoting artists in Vancouver is something that is so close to you, and you talk about like the difference in Vancouver and Toronto and stuff. Talk to me more about that and why that's.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, man, is like I put out a project, one of my first projects, and I said I might do it for the culture, and that's kind of just been like my slogan, like
Yeah.
it's just kind of like I'm like, yo, if I have the network and I have the capability to try and impact change, why wouldn't I try?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of people, they can say, oh yeah, I'm gonna get to a certain level of success and then I'm gonna come back and do it. And I'm just like, well, like it doesn't really hurt me to just create opportunities for other people while I'm improving on my own career.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe like the currency of time, I'm splitting some time between 100 Collective and Teon Gibbs, the artist.
Yeah.
But other than that, bro, like what's like, like what's wrong with me doing that? And at the end of the day, like I think it actually adds a lot of like value to me as a brand and as a person. Like I serve on the Music BC board of directors.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't have 100 Collective.
Yeah.
Right. And I wouldn't be able to do like some consulting and grant coaching for Creative BC if
Yeah.
it wasn't for 100 Collective. So allows me to be more in community now,
And you talk about being part of like the BC Music Association and being on their board. I know you mentioned that position for you is so unique because you're actually in the industry, and it gives that perspective, right? And you're able to make that impact on a larger scale.
Yeah.
What has that experience been like, and what does that mean to you? I feel like just hearing your journey from everything that we talked about to sitting on like the board of directors of such a big organization, like what does that mean to you?
It's cool, man. It's like like I have citizenship. I was born with citizenship. But in a lot of ways I kind of like almost like immigrated here. You know what I mean? So it's like it's just cool to see that I came here with no network and to be in a position where I can offer support and to some degree influence on things that are happening in the BC like music landscape is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
And it means a lot to me in the sense that like I can now now offer accountability.
Mm.
You know, if I think there's a decision or a plan that is like I think we can do better, at least I can like communicate
Exactly.
that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So yeah.
That's awesome, man. Um, in one of your interviews, you said that you don't want to chase the bar, you want to set it, right?
Mm.
And and even reading more about your journey and from everything that you talked about, and the type of music that you create, like something that I've seen is you really you push boundaries and you go to places even in the type of music that you create that not most people explore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that. Obviously in the context of even like the different types of like uh types of music that you create.
Yeah, I think for me, man, like when I listen to music, um, every there's a lot of albums that I think are like really notable albums that have happened. You know, they come out every 2 or 3 years where it's like, wow, that was a very special piece of music.
Mm.
Um, and usually when that happens, uh, it's like a breath of fresh air,
Yeah.
right? So for me, I'm just like, I don't really understand the logic of I'm just gonna sound like everybody else and
Mm.
make the same things that everybody else is doing and expect my brand to stand out.
Mm.
You know, I
Yeah.
just I don't doesn't like
Yeah.
I think even from a business standpoint it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you want to be unique to the market.
Yeah.
And maybe if I was to just sound like everything else or everybody else, I could be a little bit further along in my Spotify ranking or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what happens with that is like those songs that you make, because they sound like everything else, they have a very short lifespan. Whereas like, some of my most popular songs that are still getting a lot of like streams and a lot
Mm.
of like attention um, are songs that, have sounded different and they've just remained consistent over a couple years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, in the long run, like it's actually better for your brand to create something unique.
Exactly.
So that's just the way I look at it. It's like if I want to make a classic album, the only way I'm going to do that is by making something that's uniquely classic to me,
Yeah.
right? And then impacting the market in that way, as opposed to just being like, hey, like I sound just like Lil Baby. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's dope. I sound just like Travis Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, sick. So does a million other people. So.
Yeah. One thing I can definitely tell from your story is there's a mix of a really strong work ethic, um, a sense of like really good like self awareness and self reflection,
Mm.
and then even like you could have all of that, but you're not like strategic or you don't think about like as you mentioned right now you talk about like having a unique selling point or that creative like aspect of it that you really have, right?
Mm.
um Obviously being in the public eye and having a platform is not something that's easy. And in my own experiences, one, a lot of people have like expectations from you. um Even keeping up with those expectations, you always have to have like one win and find looking for the next win and looking for the next win, and things do get tough.
Mm.
How do you manage to keep up with like your mental well-being, your physical well-being? Like how do you manage to um you know make sure you're doing fine in the grand scheme of things? Like you obviously work so hard and work towards like that next thing.
Yeah, I think I'll start with like the more vulnerable piece
Mm.
of like, yo, dog, like there are times where like shit is just rough.
Mm.
Like there's just no way around it. Like
Yeah.
mentally you get down on yourself.
Yeah.
You start speaking negatively about yourself or about
Yeah.
where you're at, about like, I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes I watch a lot of like podcasts and shows and people just sound like they're just like the goats.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there's no way that you didn't like,
Exactly.
come down on yourself. And throughout this journey, I can guarantee you, man, that I've experienced every emotion you could experience.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like where like anything where you're just like, you hate yourself as a person, you hate everything you've done, you think about the sacrifices you've made, and
Yeah.
like, you're like, was it worth it?
Yeah.
And I've also had the highest heights as
Yeah.
well. So like it is okay, like if you're gonna go through that. and I've kind of learned to regulate it a little bit better over the years, where it's like it's okay to be down on yourself one night,
Yeah.
2 nights, but you gotta pick yourself up,
Yeah.
and you know, at a certain point, like you just gotta be like, all right, okay, like me being down on myself is not gonna change anything.
Yeah.
So like, what can I do? What can I be strategic
Yeah.
on next? Like, how do I better myself? Do I need to take just a day off?
Mm.
You know, like
Yeah.
it is okay. Like I don't take a lot of days off, but every now and then I take a day off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
it's just like you need one to just
Yeah.
do nothing.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that and being
Yeah.
vulnerable. Like, I feel like we live in a time, obviously, as men, we we there's so much conversation around what it means to be a man, right? And
Yeah.
and being vulnerable and being empathetic and being the person that you are. Obviously, men's mental health is like the biggest issue right now, and suicide rates for men are the highest.
Yeah.
What advice or what would you say to a young man listening right now? Obviously, we live in times where people are still trying to figure out like what does it mean to even be a man growing up, right? So, what would you say to that?
Um, yo, I think therapy is an amazing tool.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody,
Mm.
but if you can find a therapist that is aligned with you, I think that'll be an amazing tool
Yeah.
for anyone. I also think keeping yourself in a regular, consistent kind of schedule
Yeah.
is really important.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think one thing that really helped me just in my journey is also just like, bro, as whack as it sounds, it's just a lot of walks.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
walks, just like talking to myself on walks.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's been really helpful. But as far as like anyone out there like struggling with identity issues, yeah, it's gonna take a lot of like discovery, a lot of journeying, a lot of figuring things out. And I think the one thing everyone should just know is like, yo, you're not alone in that, bro.
Yeah.
You know, and it's okay to show vulnerability and have like compassionate people around you to talk to. And like, yeah, like I know, like I grew up in a family where it's like, you know, like my dad's not soft. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Right. He's not soft.
Yeah.
You know? So like, it's also very hard for me to like open up about things.
Yeah.
But like, you get to a point where you just kind of need to. You know.
Yeah.
So it's okay to reach out for help, man. Like, don't be afraid to do that.
Teon, I think you sharing like your story and being vulnerable is because there's a lot of people that look up to you, and then there'll be a lot of people that are listening to this that feel like they have to be a certain way and can't be vulnerable, can't open up, and the fact that you can do that as a role model, I think, is so powerful, and we need more people like you to do that.
Oh, I appreciate that, man.
So I really appreciate you sharing that. We are almost towards the end of our podcast, and from your story, I can definitely see that you have really strong values in terms of what that big why is and what you're working towards eventually, and the world that you want to see. I see obviously the creativity and all the music that you've done, and everything that you've achieved and everything that you stand for. What advice would you have for anyone that's listening that is still very early in their I guess leadership journey, and they do have an idea, be it in the arts and music or be it elsewhere, and they're just starting off? What advice would you have for that person?
It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're aligning yourself with people who have a bit more experience than you.
Yeah.
And be open to feedback, because the people who are going to be brutally honest with you,
Yeah.
probably the people who care the most about you. So if you have someone like, just like even like KB, there's been times where KB has told me, nah, I don't really see that show being that successful. I don't think we should do it.
Yeah.
And it almost like motivated me more to like want to push harder for
Yeah.
it to be successful.
Yeah.
So like, you know, having people around you that can just like keep you in check is very important. So those are my 3 pieces of advice.
Man, thank you so much. I feel like you could have ended it on a better note. I feel like that's is really gonna have that impact that we're
Hopefully, man.
looking for. And
Yeah.
thank you for all that you've done. And I know you have a show tonight, so
Yeah, it's
good
gonna be
luck
dope.
with that.
It's gonna be
And
lit.
obviously, good luck with everything that you have that's in store for you. And thank you, man. Thank you for sharing your
I
story.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and yeah, hopefully we can do this again sometime.
For sure.
Yeah,
Awesome. I hope you were as inspired by this conversation as I was. If you'd like to follow our journey and learn more about some of the other episodes, I encourage all of you to check out our social media platforms at Leaders of Today Pod. That is at Leaders of Today Pod. Before we end, I want to remind you that as young people, we're not only the leaders of tomorrow, but we're the leaders of today.